America's national parks have incredible diverse landscapes where if you go from one to another, you may as well be going to a different country and in some cases a different planet. But what I feel like people don't talk about enough is the really cool folklore and mysteries and mythology surrounding these national parks that truly give them a soul. So this is a chart that I created that has a lot of different things like mysteries and conspiracies, cryptids, general interesting facts about those cool park places. I personally love the parks. I have been to 40 of the 62 or 63 national parks if you consider the Gateway Arch a national park. So I feel like I'm almost qualified to talk about these topics, even though I feel like I don't hardly know anything. But just bear with me and we will go ahead and get into the video. But before I get into the video, this video is sponsored by no one. So instead, we created exclusive merch specifically for this video, only up for a limited time. This is the Explore the Mysteries America's National Park shirt. It will only be selling until October 31st and then it will be gone forever. But it's a really cool design. I'm really excited about this shirt. And I know it's good quality because it's just like the Kraken is real shirt and this Hollow Earth shirt that I wear all the time, which we'll be talking about here in a second. But go get your merch, Cryptid Hunting Team. I got a lobotomy, and then we also have stickers. And then I also created this hieroglyph shirt that has a bunch of different hieroglyphs, and then it says Psychopoli at the bottom. But if you want that limited time shirt, it will be up until October 31st, 2025, and then gone forever. Thanks guys, back to the video. So throughout this video, we're going to be talking about more well-known things like the Fresno Nightcrawlers, the Yellowstone Super Volcano, Missing 411, and then later on we'll be talking about much more deranged topics, such as the Valley of Headless Men, Zion National Park Secret Cave, the Bermuda Triangle of Yosemite. And just keep in mind as you watch this, we will be discussing legends and myths and conspiracy theories that aren't supposed to be taken quite as seriously as some of the more things that are just like facts and knowledge about the parks. But we're going to go ahead and start off at the top of the iceberg, starting off with Missing 411. So Missing 411 refers to this series of cases documented by David Paulides, where different people have mysteriously disappeared in national parks or forests or just wilderness areas. Usually these people disappear without a trace or just under very strange circumstances, and while some people think these disappearances are normal and have a logical explanation, others think that there's a disproportionate amount of people disappearing and that maybe there's a cover-up or some sort of sinister explanation. Anyways, we will talk about more of this later. Next up, we got Bigfoot. I'm sure everybody knows what Bigfoot is. Sasquatch originated in the Pacific Northwest. Bigfoot is most frequently sighted in national parks like Olympic National Park, Mount Rainier, North Cascades National Park, and also Yosemite. And most of the Bigfoot sightings have happened after the 1950s. Next up we got Death Valley. So Death Valley is known for being the hottest place on Earth, where it's known for having the recorded temperature of 134 degrees Fahrenheit in 1913. Death Valley also has the lowest point in North America at 282 feet below sea level. Summer temperatures here regularly get over 120 degrees Fahrenheit, and I went there 2 years ago and we camped in an RV without AC, and it was extremely hot. I feel like of different national parks, this one may be the one that feels the most like a different planet, which is kind of funny because the first Star Wars movie, A New Hope, was actually first filmed there whenever C-3PO and R2-D2 crash landed on Tatooine. This was actually filmed in the dunes of Death Valley. But man, when you're there, it feels like hot air is constantly being blown on your face by a heater. So it can be very miserable, especially in the middle of the day. 399. So this is referring to Grizzly Bear 399, which is actually the most famous bear in North America. This is a female brown bear that has given birth to 22 cubs in Grand Teton and Yellowstone National Park. It actually became the oldest bear ever known to reproduce at the age of 27 years old. But even at the age of 26, this bear raised 4 cubs, which it's rare for a bear to even raise 4 cubs at any age. So at the age of 26, this is very unlikely. This bear lived to the age of 28, where it was then hit by a vehicle in October 2024. Part of the reason this bear is so famous is actually because she always kept her cubs near the road, because male bears don't like going near roadways, and so I guess she realized this and she kept her cubs close to the road to keep them safe from those bears, and so that's why they became so famous. They were constantly being sighted. Next is Lumberjack Legends. So around the 1800s to early 1900s, lumberjacks used to pass the time by telling these stories around the campfire. Some of these tales included things like Paul Bunyan and that sort of thing, but there was also these tales of things called fearsome critters. These creatures are a big part of American folklore. For example, they are things like the jackalope, which is like the antlered rabbit, the squonk, the hide behind, the snipe, the hodag, and even the slide rock bolter, which we will talk about later on. Angel's Landing. So Angel's Landing is the name of the most popular hike in Zion National Park. This is a 5-mile round trip hike that has sections that are really steep, and I'm pretty sure you've probably seen famous pictures of like the chains that are on the side of like a huge cliff. That is Angel's Landing, and you have to hike and use these chains to pass these really narrow areas. I did this hike 2 years ago back in 2023, and it was extremely fun, but it scared my wife. But I feel like it was one of the most rewarding hikes for the amount of work you had to do, because it really wasn't that hard of a hike, but you get to see like extremely beautiful landscapes. Anyways, the reason why it was called Angel's Landing is, according to the National Park Service, there was a Methodist minister named Frederick Vinning Fisher who first visited Zion Canyon back in 1916. And when he saw the rock formation that is now known as Angel's Landing, he said only an angel could land there. So there's the name. The Thunderbird. So the Thunderbird is this bird-like spirit in Native American mythology that controls the weather. It's said to create thunder by flapping its wings, and it brings rain wherever it flies. According to archaeologists, depictions of the Thunderbird have been around for like 4,000 years. Throughout the national parks, we can see different references to the Thunderbird. There's even a mountain called Thunderbird Mountain that's an 8,000-foot peak in Glacier National Park, and there's also like lodges, a famous lodge called the Thunderbird Lodge there and such. Yellowstone Super volcano. You probably know this, but Yellowstone National Park is actually just a massive volcano, which is why there's all that geothermal activity going on all throughout the park. The volcano caldera is actually 45 miles across. It's so massive that if there was an eruption of this thing, it would likely cover 3/4 of the entire United States. But don't worry, it only erupts on average about 600,000 to 800,000 years. And the last major eruption was like 630,000 years ago. So Free Solo. So Free Solo is a documentary that was created in 2018 about this guy named Alex Honnold who climbed the massive El Capitan cliff face in Yosemite. He did this climb without a rope. If you have not been to Yosemite, El Capitan is unbelievably large. It looks like a flat rock, which I know it has some crevices and places you can move around. Obviously, that's how he was able to climb it, but it is unbelievable that someone climbed that thing without a harness or ropes. Anyways, the documentary is really good, and I highly recommend watching it. Smoky Mountain Disappearances. So this is referring to how at least 5 people have disappeared in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park under mysterious circumstances where they were never even found. The most prominent of these disappearances was back in 1969. Dennis Martin, a 6-year-old boy, seemed to vanish during a game of hide-and-seek on a family camping trip. This sparked a massive search for this kid, and even the Green Berets were looking for him. There was helicopters, search dogs, but despite all this, nothing was found. Another strange thing to note is some of the witnesses in like another valley over, who, keep in mind, were not taken very seriously, reported hearing a scream and then they saw a bear man carrying something. Anyways, other disappearances in the Smoky Mountains include the 1979 disappearance of Trenny Gibson, a 16-year-old on a field trip, who also disappeared without a trace on a hiking trail while going up Klingman's Dome, which is one of the most popular areas of the park. There's also a few other mysterious disappearances that contributes to the park's reputation for unexplained events. UFOs at Joshua Tree. The national park known as Joshua Tree is known for these Joshua trees, which are just like these distinctive, spiky looking trees that are found primarily in this park. They're also known for a fairly large amount of UFO sightings. And you know, considering it's a big open sky in a desert and this area has minimal light pollution, this also contributes to the fact of people seeing UFOs. Another thing to note is there is a major military base just 40 miles away, and anyways, there was this guy who built this dome-shaped UFO kind of looking structure just north of Joshua Tree because he claims he was contacted by aliens from Venus who guided him to build it. The largest tree on Earth. So the largest tree on Earth that we know of is General Sherman in Sequoia National Park. If you base the largest tree in terms of actual overall height, the highest tree in the world is Hyperion, standing at 380 feet tall. This tree is so tall that it is actually taller than the Statue of Liberty, or the Big Ben clock thing if you're from Europe. Now, while many people think that this is actually a picture of the tree, it's actually not, and we don't know exactly the location of where this tree is. But this picture does give you a good representation for how much taller these trees are compared to other regular sized trees. Anyways, as far as the actual largest tree in relation to like overall physical mass of a tree, General Sherman is a giant sequoia, and Sequoia National Park is the largest by volume. This is actually the biggest tree ever in recorded history at 275 feet tall and 25 feet wide. It is so old that it is estimated to have started to grow around 700 BC, making it 2,700 years old. This tree has been around 700 years before the birth of Christ. That is insane. Ghost lights. So this is a phenomena where people see different glowing orbs that have actually been reported for over a century. Examples of these orbs are like the Brown Mountain lights in North Carolina, in the Pisgah National Forest, I probably didn't pronounce that right, or the Thomas Divide lights in the Great Smoky Mountains, or just the spook light that is on the border of Missouri and Oklahoma. Traditionally, these things were thought to be spirits by Native Americans, and scientific explanations of them remain inconclusive. But there are a lot of these things that are cited by like a lot of different people. They're usually like this ball of light that's moving along the ground, or even like moving along train tracks for some reason. Theories of them range from like swamp gas being ignited to ball lightning, which is like this thing where lightning appears as like this plasma ball, which also I think is yet to have been confirmed by science, but it's still really cool. I've actually known people that have said they have potentially seen a ghost light around the southern Missouri area. Saguaro cactus lifespan. So Saguaro National Park, or Saguaro National Park, is this park in Arizona that has some of the largest cactuses in the world. This giant cactus is probably way older than what you think, because I thought it wasn't that old, but it's really old. Typically, these things live to be over 200 years old. What's really crazy is just to grow a single first arm on the cactus, some of these things take 100 years. So when you see these huge cactuses that have multiple arms, they are likely over 150 years old. Anyways, it's really deceptive because I'm sure you've seen pictures of these cactuses, but if you have not seen them in person, they are really tall. Like they can grow to 50 feet tall. The tallest one recorded was actually 78 feet tall. Here's a picture of my wife under one of these cactuses. We did this hike in Saguaro National Park and it was a wonderful hike. And man, these cactuses are massive. Next, we got the rim to rim. So the rim to rim is this strenuous 24-mile hike across the inside of the Grand Canyon. Usually, this is done from the north rim to the south rim using the North Kaibab Trail going to the Bright Angel Trail. When you do this trail, it is approximately 10,000 feet of overall elevation gain. It can actually be done in a single day or it can be spread over multiple days. We did the hike a couple years ago, and for some reason we did it in the middle of June, which wasn't the smartest. We came from there-ish this morning. So Lindsay decided we were going to do this. She's like, hey Aaron, do you want to do the rim to rim in the middle of June? I was like, sounds like a really bad idea. Yes. And so here we are. But it was a really good time. We did it in 2 days, and we spent the night in one of the campgrounds at the bottom. And do not bring a heavy tent. And I'm not just talking about like a kind of light tent. I mean, do not bring a tent that has poles in it. Just bring hiking poles. Anyways, whenever you hear stories about like explorers getting stuck down in the Grand Canyon and like not being able to find their way out, I'm always like, why couldn't they get out? And then like you get there, and you get down to the canyon and you look around and you're like, oh, there's walls all around me that are like similar to El Capitan. How could anybody get out of this thing? If there was no trail to hike out of the Grand Canyon, there is no way you are getting out. Some sections are 1,000 to 3,000 feet high. All right, next up we got the skunk ape. So this is a large hairy humanoid that is kind of like Bigfoot. People have claimed to see this thing down in the Everglades in Florida. The reason why this thing is called the skunk ape is because it smells really stinky, according to some of the witnesses. There are also these photos that are allegedly taken of the ape in Sarasota, Florida, that was taken in the year 2000, where there was this older woman that actually mailed these pictures to the Sarasota Police Department, saying that she was concerned with this orangutan that might bite someone and give them hepatitis, and that she was getting annoyed with this monkey stealing fruit off of her tree at night. 2,000 arches. So this is referring to the fact that Arches National Park actually has over 2,000 natural formed arches in the form of rocks in the park. Arches National Park is famous for that huge 52-foot tall arch structure, which I'm sure you've seen a picture of it. It's called the Delicate Arch. But some of these arches span up to 300 feet, and they've been sculpted by time and erosion, and this national park is extremely busy. Here's a picture when I was there. It's pretty cool. I mean, it's cool. It's a cool place. Gettysburg Ghosts. So this is a phenomenon where different people have gone to the area where they had the Battle of Gettysburg during the Civil War, and they claim to see what looks like soldiers or spirits of soldiers that appear as like these apparitions, and maybe they might hear like an unexplained sound like cannon firing, or hearing like phantom footsteps in the area. And other people say that they experience orbs or cold spots. And yeah, there's been a lot of people that have said they feel like strange presences or have seen weird things in the Gettysburg area. Haunted caves. So Mammoth Caves National Park is known for being the world's longest cave system, with over 426 miles of cave mapped. What's crazy is this cave system is known by many to be the most haunted natural wonder in the world. The reason people say this is due to like different paranormal activity, such as things like seeing shadowy figures or hearing strange voices, or feeling like they're being touched or pushed, particularly in like deeper areas of the cave sections. What I find really interesting is while there are 400 miles mapped, they estimate that there's still another 600 miles of the cave that remains to be discovered. Highest paved road in the US. So this is referring to Trail Ridge Road in Rocky Mountain National Park. This is actually the highest continuous paved road in the United States. It is a 48-mile span that ascends up to 12,183 feet that connects Estes Park to Grand Lake. The road is an amazing wonder. It is crazy that anybody was even able to build this road. When you drive on it, you are often above the clouds, and you'll almost always see elk, or sometimes you'll see bighorn sheep. But they said when they were building the road, workers had 4 months a year to build it because of how awful the conditions are in that high of altitude. Another thing is that clearing this road in the spring can take like 40 days, and the snow drifts can be like 25 feet high. Mountain beaver. So one time I was on a trip with my family when I was younger, and we were driving on Trail Ridge Road, and we got off the road and we were walking on a trail, and there was a marmot. And I said jokingly to my brother, my family, I can't remember who it was, I said, look, that's a mountain beaver. And then another family next to me told their kids, guys, that's a mountain beaver. And so that's why this is on this iceberg. I guess there is actually a real animal called the mountain beaver. So Into the Wild. So Into the Wild is a true story that was written into a book that later became a movie about this guy named Chris McCandles, who after graduating top student and athlete at a nice university, gave away all his possessions and his entire savings account to charity and then abandoned society. This guy then hitchhiked all over the country, going to different places and doing odd jobs, where he eventually decides that he wants to go to Alaska to live in the wilderness, where he then shortly after dies of starvation. It seemed that Chris sought some sort of ultimate freedom of living in the wild, and a lot of people have really strong opinions on him and what he did, but it is sad, but also kind of a cool story. And the movie on it was pretty good too. Mount Shasta. So this is a mountain in Northern California that is a sacred site for different Native American tribes, but it also has a lot of really strange legends surrounding it. The most famous of these legends, there's a lot of them, but the most famous is that it hides an underground city called Telos, and that this city is inhabited by survivors of a lost continent called Lemuria. Lemuria is this idea that was proposed by scientists back in like the 1800s, who was trying to explain why there was lemurs in India and also Madagascar. So he proposed the idea of this continent called Lemuria, and anyways, people like to say there was some sort of ancient advanced civilization there, and that the Lemurians that lived there were like borderline giants and they were 7 feet tall, and that they had like psychic abilities like telekinesis. And for some reason, the entire continent sank under the ocean, and now the entire civilization has gone to live under Mount Shasta, where they have a huge city and an artificial sun. Oh yeah, and there is also a lot of UFO sightings in the area, and that is part of the legend somehow. Dead Horse Canyonlands. Dead Horse is this point that is right next to Canyonlands National Park, where the cowboys used to herd these wild horses that were roaming the desert onto this plateau area that they used as a corral, and they created this pen surrounded by sheer cliffs and used brush to create a fence across the actual land part. Horses would often die of exposure once they were trapped out on this plateau thing, and that's where it got its name, Dead Horse. Largest national park. So this is referring to Wrangell St. Elias National Park in Alaska. This is the largest national park in the entire United States. It has more land than Switzerland, and also it surprisingly has the world's largest grouping of active volcanoes and mountains over 16,000 feet in the national park system. Also, the second largest mountain in the entire United States, Mount St. Elias, is there at 18,008 feet, and 9 of the 16 tallest mountain peaks in the country are there as well. Largest bear on Earth. So I'm sure you have heard of bears, but have you heard of Kodiak bears? Kodiak bears are a subspecies of brown bear. They can be found in Katmai National Park in Alaska, but most famously they are associated with Kodiak Island in the Kodiak archipelago there in Alaska. Technically speaking, these bears could be the largest bear in the world, even being heavier than the polar bear in one instance. The largest Kodiak bear was said to be 2,400 pounds before it lost its weight in its old age, according to the zookeeper that handled it. The largest polar bear ever recorded in the wild was 2,200 pounds. There's kind of a discrepancy here where people aren't sure if this zookeeper was telling the truth or if he was kind of exaggerating, but Kodiak bears are really, really cool. The reason why they get so big is they've actually been isolated for 12,000 years in this tiny southwest region of Alaska, where they have just grown really big because of their environment, and they also live longer lifespans than other bear species, living in the wild between 20 to 30 years on average. Next we got Fresno Nightcrawlers. So this is a cryptid that looks like this white, almost ghostly pair of pants. There are 4 major sightings of this thing. One of them was in Fresno, California, where it got its name, but the most notable one was one captured on a security camera in Yosemite National Park. The security footage shows these 2 creatures, a larger one and a shorter one. Some think the smaller one's like a baby of the larger one, that appear as these white kind of humanoid looking things that have extremely small upper bodies with no arms. Most of their height is made up by their legs, and they walk around kind of silly like. The footage itself is kind of eerie in a way, and while some of the sightings have turned out to be hoaxes that were just pants walking around with people's torsos edited out, people have a hard time deeming if the major ones, the major sightings like the security footage, are legit or fake, or what's going on in them. Anyways, we have pant creatures, and I love them. Stairs in the Woods Mystery. So the Stairs in the Woods Mystery refers to this legend that became popular online, where these people claim that they find these mysterious staircases standing alone deep in wilderness areas. Usually these stories go on about how these staircases are found without reasonable explanation of them being there, and there's no surrounding structures, and they're usually attributed to things like paranormal phenomena, and they're talked about as if they're some sort of gateway or portal to a different plane of reality. They're said to often be found in extremely rural or deep nature places. The original story about these mysterious woods that got this whole thing popular came from this person who was claiming to be a search and rescue officer, who said that every time they would go roughly 30 to 40 miles into extreme rural areas in like the northern part of the US, they would always run into one of these staircases, and every time he would try to talk to people that were working with him, they always acted strange about the stairs, like they didn't want to talk about it. But in these cases, people that interacted with these stairs would have different strange things happen to them. Like one guy went up for 5 minutes and allegedly came back down 5 years later, and another guy went to the top of the stairs and reached up to grab a tree branch where he had his hand sliced clean off, and the remains of his hand were gone without explanation, as if they had gone into like another dimension. But many people believe that the mystery Stairs in the Woods story is just a creepypasta or like online made up story. Grand Canyon's Class 10 Rapids. So whitewater rafting has a common scale where they classify how difficult the rapids are on a scale of 1 to 6. However, the Colorado River in the Grand Canyon has a unique grading system. They have a scale that goes from 1 to 10. And while I would love to say that like the Class 10 rapids are like some insanely hard mystical rapid that no one can even go down, that's not what it means. It's just kind of a different way to rate the rapids, and it doesn't mean that they are necessarily harder. Headless Bride at Old Faithful Inn. So this is a legend about this rich young girl who married this man and then went to stay at the Old Faithful Inn in Yellowstone National Park in 1915. It turned out this guy was a gold digger, and that he somehow spent all their money when they were on their honeymoon at the Old Faithful Inn, and that he ran out of the hotel after a large argument where this lady, his wife, was found decapitated in the bathroom a few days later after her husband had left. The tale goes that now, over the years, guests have cited this apparition of a woman wearing a flowery white dress walking down the stairs from the Crow's Nest, which is this area at the top of the hotel, holding her head under her arm. Anyways, this story is just kind of a urban legend, and there's no solid evidence on it existing other than like word of mouth. Carlsbad Cavern. So Carlsbad Cavern National Park is this national park in New Mexico that is this massive limestone cave that has incredible rock formations. It has the largest cave chamber in North America called the Big Room, and it will blow your mind when you go see it. It's absolutely magical compared to Mammoth Caves. In my opinion, it is much better in every way. But I did a video of it back in the day where I compared Carlsbad to Mystery Flesh Pit National Park, which I'll talk about later on in this video. But yeah, good time, sick cave, otherworldly, for real. The Ghost of Hog Allen. So this is a legend from Zion National Park about this man named Hog Allen Smith. He was said to be really greedy and threaten anybody who tried to settle on his territory, which was alongside the North Creek in the southern region of what is now Zion National Park. After this guy passed away, one of the local families who he had terrorized there in Zion faced a series of inexplicable tragedies that they attributed to Hog Allen's vengeful spirit. Today, both park rangers and visitors throughout the years have reported different strange things like eerie mists, strange noises, just like a general unsettling atmosphere in this area known as Hog's Haven or Hog's Heaven, which is located between the Narrows and Column Terrace inside of the park. 127 hours. If you are squeamish to things like blood and stuff, I would recommend skipping like a minute or two ahead. 127 Hours is the title of this movie about a real life story where this guy went out climbing in Canyonlands National Park in Utah, where he dislodged a rock and then spent 127 hours with his arm pinned beneath a boulder. He was there for over 5 days, and this guy tried everything to get unstuck. First, he spent 10 hours chipping away at the rock with his pocket knife, where finally he decided that chipping away with his knife at the rock wasn't going to get it out, and that he had to cut off his own arm. The knife, however, was too dull to cut through the bone because he was chipping away at the rock for a really long time. So he literally broke his own arm and then cut through the flesh and the tendons. And yeah, he amputated his own arm and he lived. I just could not imagine breaking your own arm, physically somehow leveraging yourself to break those bones. Anyways, here's a picture of the rock that pinned him for those 5 days. It actually took 13 men and a winch and a hydraulic jack to get his arm from against the wall. So there's no way he was going to be able to leverage it himself to get his own arm out, because I'm pretty sure he tried to leverage the rock at first, and yeah, there's no way he would have done it. So crazy. People survive things that are just like, how, you know? Feral people. So this kind of goes off the missing 411 topic. Some people think that maybe there are feral people that live in rural areas of the United States, or maybe even in national parks, that might live in like cave systems, and that these feral people are essentially like a group that grew up isolated from other human contact at a very young age, and maybe they are very animalistic and don't hardly speak any languages. And there is like a graphic that shows like the relation between national park caves and disappearances, and people like to say, oh, these people get close to these caves and feral people come out and grab them and eat them, and that maybe these people are cannibals. Anyways, people will even take this and go a step further and say that maybe the government knows about this and they don't really want to solve the problem because it's too hard to deal with. And so to keep these creatures at bay, they made these places national parks, and that the national parks were basically created to feed these feral people, or maybe these cryptid-like creatures. Anyways, you're welcome that you know that now. 1 square inch of silence. So located inside of Olympic National Park is the quietest place in the US. There's this area in the Hoh rainforest that is marked by this small red pebble on a mossy log that serves as a marker for the epicenter of what they call the most quiet place. They say this place is so absent of human-made noise that you only hear things like natural sounds like birds calling and the rushing of the river and that people will like really try to respect this area, and that like even some pilots will try to divert their flight paths to not fly directly over this area. I went to the Hoh Forest and it was cool and it was quiet, but I will say the Great Sand Dunes at night, that is super quiet. But we'll talk about the Great Sand Dunes later, kind of. The Slide Rock Bolter. So the Slide Rock Bolter is one of the fearsome creatures from Lumberjack lore. This is a legend about this large creature known as a mountain whale that basically is this whale that lives in the mountains of Colorado that will hang on the side of a mountain only on slopes that are more angled than 45 degrees, where it uses its hook tail to hold on to the mountain, and then it will release it, where it then slides down the mountain with its massive gaping mouth wide open, eating everything in its path. Then once it gets to the bottom, it uses its momentum to just go up to the side of another mountain and hook onto that and wait for more prey, or when it gets hungry again, I guess. I really like this legend because I feel like it's really creative, because, you know, nobody says, hey, there's a whale living in these mountains, you know? People are always like, there's a Bigfoot, there's a Bigfoot. No, there's a whale. There is a creature that's meant to live in the ocean, in the mountains, right now. And that's wonderful, and I love that. I love when people are completely deranged. Mesa Verde abandonment. So Mesa Verde is this area that are like these little rock structures that are cliff dwellings that once housed an estimated 5,000 to 20,000 people. The abandonment of these cliff villages is one of the greatest archaeological mysteries in the United States. So around the 1200s, there were these towns that had tons of people in it that just suddenly left, and there was a dramatic migration to somewhere else. One of the main theories to why they left is because these people were like big corn farmers, and suddenly they had this drought that depleted their resources, and so they just left the area. I've gone to Mesa Verde and I've seen the cliff dwellings, and they're really cool. And I remember when I was there, somewhere in the group asked, why did these people live up in these cliffs? Were they doing it for protection? And I might be remembering it wrong, but I'm pretty sure the park ranger answered confidently that no, they didn't live in these cliffs for protection, rather they lived there for resources. Personally, I think if you live on this cliff that is impenetrable, I mean, this is like maybe harder to get to than trying to like take over a castle. Why would you live there if you weren't there specifically to protect yourself? Do you think they accidentally live there because, oh, there's resources? Like, yeah, I guess there was some water there, and yeah, maybe the cliffs did provide from like natural weather, like rain and stuff, and also it probably cooled them off some too. But I wouldn't think that these people would all live there just because. Anyways, I think if they were there farming corn, they would be using these areas to store their corn, and like, wouldn't everybody want their corn? So you could just put it up there in a cliff and be like, yeah, you can't get this. I mean, what are you going to do? Come take over my village that is on a massive wall, and we can wall off like a 2-foot space. You can come through a 2-foot space. That's like incredible protection. Anyways, what were they protecting themselves from? Probably people trying to get their corn. Why did they abandon it so quickly? No corn. The Witch of Big Bend, also known as Bruja of Big Bend, or the Spirit of Bruja. This is a legend about this lady with green eyes that used to live in a canyon for many years, who was a skilled healer and midwife. She was also regarded as this powerful witch, which bruja is a Spanish word for witch, before she was killed by a group of bandits. In 1978, there was these 2 hikers who said they had an experience where they saw this witch that watched them at night. That's about it for that one. Leaked Dogman photos. There are these pictures online where people claim that they photographed this dogman creature that was inside one of the national parks, I think like maybe Arches or something. It appears as this dog thing with pointy ears, and it's a pretty slender creature, but it's very creepy looking. Its eyes like are borderline glowing. I saw a lot of people claiming that this thing was probably just like a Great Dane that was standing up, or a mountain lion, as some big cats will like hold on to things and, you know, make them stand upright, which honestly, that kind of might be scarier than Dogman. Anyways, the legend of Dogman, the more modern one, if you don't know, began with a sighting in 1887 where these lumberjacks were in Wexford County, Michigan, and they spoke about this towering wolf-headed thing that walked upright like a man. And for some reason, this legend says that every 10 years, with years ending in 7, the Dogman comes out, and yeah. But I do find it interesting that there is this Native American tribe that tells stories of a beast resembling a dogman that has been told among the tribes living near the Manistee River in Michigan, right next to where that 1880 sighting happened. So Lassen Volcanic National Park. So this is one of the lesser known national parks in the country. It is located in Northern California, and it's known for its diverse volcanic features. Lassen Peak is the most prominent feature in the park, where it's one of the largest plume dome volcanoes in the world. I actually went hiking there with my wife when we were on a trip, and we hiked the Cinder Cone volcano there, where you can hike up this huge cinder cone volcano, and then you can actually walk down inside the cinder cone into where it would have erupted from. And it is so cool. That national park is, I feel like, one of the most, maybe the #1 most underrated national parks in the US. But you can also see different things there, like these areas where the lava actually flowed, and also these massive boulders that were shot into the air from the last eruption that happened just back in 1921. Which is kind of crazy. Mystery Flesh Pit National Park. So this is a fictional online story where this guy has created this story about a place called Mystery Flesh Pit National Park. So essentially what the Flesh Pit is a super massive organism that is essentially a giant creature that's over 11 miles long that is living beneath the earth. And for some reason, people decided to build a national park inside of this creature, giving it the name the Mystery Flesh Pit National Park because it appears like it's some massive, thing of flesh, when in reality it's the insides of a creature, and people enter through the throat, and then they go to different places like the bronchial forest, which is the lungs, or like I think it's like the thermal hot springs, which is like the stomach with stomach acid and stuff. But in the story, there are a lot of amenities inside of this national park, such as entire hotels or restaurants or bars, and there's a petting zoo, and there's also creatures that are, I think they're supposed to be forms of like microbacteria and that sort of things that are like these giant bug creatures that are kind of dangerous down inside this creature. Anyways, I thought it was a really cool story online about national parks, and it's very similar to Carlsbad Cavern, kind of, in a way, if you know what I mean. Well, I mean, it's really not, but it is. So, Volcanoes National Park curse. There is this legend deeply rooted in Hawaiian folklore that goes on about how Pele, the goddess of fire, considers the volcanic rocks her children, and removing these rocks from the island is like stealing from her. So, if you remove volcanic rock, it's said that you will get cursed by Pele. What's funny about this is people hear about this curse after going to the park, and so Hawaii Volcanoes National Park actually receives thousands of mailed back lava rocks each year, often with apology letters begging for forgiveness and relief from the curse. However, once the park receives these rocks, they can no longer return them back into nature as they are worried about contaminating the environment. And while the curse is widely known, some Hawaiians consider this myth not part of the real tradition. Mammoth Cave Hollow Earth entrance. So I was obsessed with this thing when I was younger about how like Earth is maybe hollow and you can access the inside of Earth by going through mammoth caves. Hollow Earth theory is the idea that Earth is either much more hollow than the scientific community admits, or that it's at least much more cavernous, and there's a lot of large spaces down there. Some people think that if there was a way to get into the inside of Earth, then it would have to be accessible through the longest cave on Earth, which would be Mammoth Caves. And so that's why it's always been so intriguing. It's cool that there's still that like mysterious 600 potential miles still unexplored in Mammoth Caves. If you look at things like the Hollow Earth map that shows like Agartha and stuff, you can see that they always depict the Kentucky Mammoth Caves as having a way down into Hollow Earth. One thing I do find really interesting in all this lore is that there's actually part of Mammoth Caves called Symes Pit that was named after the man who proposed a version of Hollow Earth. This man named John Cleves Symes had this theory about how Earth is hollow and that it consists of 5 concentric spheres with an opening to the interior accessible through the north and the south poles. These spheres were essentially supposed to be like a series of habitable levels all inside of each other, and while he didn't prove any of his theories, he actually did prompt the exploration of both of Earth's poles because of this theory. Anyways, Symes Pit inside of Mammoth Caves is named after him, and back in the day, many people thought that this pit was like bottomless and that maybe it led to the interior of Earth. And anyways, if you're wondering where it is now, the pit that was called Symes Pit is now called Bottomless Pit today. And you know, technically caves are hollow earth. Next up, we got the Devil's Golf Course. So this is an area in Death Valley where there's essentially this huge field that has these extremely rough, jagged salt formations that are so rugged that if you tripped and fell out in this field, it could hurt you really bad. It could cut you. Anyways, they call it this because they say only the devil could play golf here.
Ooh, it's salty.
Yeah, it is salty.
Crazy. This is a crazy place.
So that's about it. Sailing stones. Speaking of Death Valley National Park, there is this weird phenomena called the sailing stones where these rocks appear to move on their own across this flat, dry lake bed inside of the park. For a long time, the only reason people even knew that they moved was because of their tracks left behind in the dirt like a snail's tail. These rocks sometimes weighed hundreds of pounds, and it seemed that these things moved without any visible means of propulsion. Some speculated that there was like some sort of spooky reason why they were moving, claiming that the stone trails that they made were like messages from aliens or otherworldly entities, or that the pioneer used to ride these babies for miles. The mystery was actually finally solved in 2014 when this guy got this footage of what appeared to be a rock moving, and it appeared that it was a combination of thin ice, shallow water, and wind that moved these rocks. The Spectre Moose. So this is a legend about this enormous ghostly white moose that is reported to be seen in different areas of Maine, particularly around Acadia National Park and other rural areas. The most prominent sightings of this thing date back to the late 1800s, where multiple eyewitnesses from people like loggers to hunters and just other locals were seeing this moose that they said was so large that it dwarfed a normal moose in comparison. Part of the lore is that this thing showed up right before disaster happened, kind of like the legend of Mothman, and that it showed up at times like right before this building burned down in this town, and that this moose would show up, people would see it, and then it would mysteriously disappear in the thick forest. And anyways, people think maybe it's just a very large albino moose. Deadliest national park hike. So for the deadliest hike, I had a hard time deciding between the Rim to Rim, which goes across the Grand Canyon, or Long's Peak in Rocky Mountain National Park. I decided on Long's Peak because a lot of the Rim to Rim deaths are usually just because of like cardiac arrest and that sort of thing. So Long's Peak is the only 14er or 14,000 foot tall mountain inside of Rocky Mountain National Park. Approximately 71 people have died hiking up longs since 1915. What's crazy is most of the time whenever you hear about deaths while you're hiking, it's usually from things like dehydration or cardiac arrest or getting too hot. But 70% of the fatalities on this mountain are specifically from falling. Really, this is no surprise if you look at the terrain of this mountain. I personally climbed this thing back in 2018. Here's some of the footage of it. Some of the parts on this mountain are just absolutely insane, like the narrows and just the different like thin cliff faces that you're walking alongside. One area was just like a piece of rebar that was sticking out of a rock that you had to basically put all your weight onto to get over the rock while having a 200-foot drop right next to it. It was really sketchy. And then once you get to the very end, there is the area that's the home stretch, which is just like right below the top of it, which is so insane. That's what really makes you realize, oh, people fall. Yeah, that makes sense, because this is a 45-degree angle, and there's really nowhere that feels safe going up the home stretch, in my opinion. And I feel like I'm pretty confident with going up and like bouldering different things like this, but whew. So here I am, right by the home stretch. It's right there, summit's right up there. Just hanging out here. I don't know if you can see how high up it is. But yeah, this is a very dangerous hike. It is probably one of the most dangerous of any hikes that are non-technical, which means you don't use rope or harness or anything. But yeah, to be honest, that was the second 14,000 foot mountain I've ever climbed, and it was probably pretty irresponsible that I did that and did that alone. Dry Tortuga free energy. So this is a conspiracy theory about how the different forts from the past are remnants of this lost civilization that had free energy. People think that some of the forts that are in a star shape were built in this shape specifically to somehow harness the electromagnetic energy of the Earth and be, in some sense, a free energy generator. As this conspiracy theory suggests, the star shape mimics a certain frequency that you would see in waves that appear on a oscilloscope, and that basically the shape of these places harmonize with the natural world, and that Dry Tortuga, the fort there, is in a star shape and they're harnessing free energy. And yep, the hodag. So the hodag is this fearsome critter, also from, the lumberjack folklore, about this creature that kind of resembles this large bull, but it's carnivorous and has these thick, curved spines down its back. So the legend is that this thing was born of ashes from a cremated oxen as the incarnation of different animal abuse who suffered at the hands of their masters, blah, blah, blah. But the story is strongly tied to northern Wisconsin and was prominent among the figures such as like Paul Bunyan and those stories. What I found really interesting was one time I was on the north side of Lake Superior in Lake Superior Provincial Park, and it's just on the other side of northern Wisconsin where this hodag legend came from. Anyways, when you're here in this park, you can see this really cool hieroglyph, which is like a pictoglyph, not really a hieroglyph, that looks just like a hodag. At the park, they call this thing the Mishipesu, also known as the Great Lynx, and that the Anishinaabe people, which was this Native American tribe, had this folklore about how the Great Lakes region had this scary creature that's often depicted as a large cat that they believe control the waters, and it was associated with like copper deposits found in the Great Lakes. And anyways, I feel like this pictoglyph was maybe supposed to be the hodag, and maybe it was misinterpreted. I don't know. I mean, to me, it does not look like a big cat. It looks exactly like the hodag. Hitler in Glacier National Park. Speaking of pretending like I know things, there is this wild claim where this guy claims that back in the late 1990s, he was dating this girl whose dad told him a deathbed confession claiming that he was Hitler's bodyguard, saying that his name was Otto Skorzeny and that he was this SS officer who was like Hitler's right-hand man, and that Skorzeny had somehow helped Hitler get smuggled into the US into Glacier National Park to live out the rest of his days. He claims that Hitler wanted to live there because this rural area and this mountainous region reminded him of his old home in the Austrian Alps, and I just don't really think so. So this guy was actually claiming to be a real world figure that actually did exist. Otto Skorzenzi was a very prominent bodyguard who actually rescued Mussolini at one point during World War II, and then after the war, he somehow escaped the prison camp and then served as military advisor for the Egyptian president in the 1950s, and then he became an agent of the Mossad, Israel Special Forces. So yes, there was a Nazi working for Israel, which is kind of crazy. Anyways, officially, Otto Skorzenzi actually died of lung cancer in 1975, and this guy who was claiming to be him was alive during the late 1990s. So, if Hitler had somehow survived World War II, I just don't think he would be able to just go to Glacier National Park and just live out his days there. Also, I just don't think he would choose that area either, you know? But next we got National Park of American Samoa. So this is actually the second least traveled to national park in the US, if you consider it as part of the US. This is the only American national park south of the equator, and the park spans between 3 volcanic islands, home to a lot of really cool wildlife. There are different endangered animals there, like the Pacific sheath-tailed bat, and the main things to do there are hiking and snorkeling, which are 2 of the greatest activities. Spearfinger Cherokee legend. So Spearfinger is this entity in Cherokee mythology that is said to wander the forests of eastern Tennessee and western North Carolina, specifically in the Smokies. The name Spearfinger refers to this thing's terrifying abilities, as it has this long pointy finger that's sharp as obsidian, and it's said to be able to pierce anything and be so powerful that it can pierce armor and rock, and that it can deflect arrows that are shot at her. And another part of the lore is that she seems like she's invincible, but she's not, because she's holding her heart in one of her hands. So that's like her fatal flaw, and if you damage her heart, she dies. Part of the lore is that the way you know she's coming is by hearing her footsteps in the woods that sound like rocks clopping together. And because of this, many people say that they may have heard her in the Smoky Mountains. Next we got Night of the Grizzlies. So this one is going to also be pretty graphic, so if you want to skip ahead like 5 minutes or 2 minutes, that'd probably be good for you if you're not wanting to hear that. So Night of the Grizzlies is one single night in August 1962 where 2 young women tragically lost their lives in completely separate grizzly bear attacks from 2 different bears in Glacier National Park. The first attack was on Julie Helgeson, a 19-year-old seasonal worker camping with a friend near Granite Park Chalet. Unknown to them, bears in the area had been eating leftovers from a nearby lodge who were just setting it outside for the bears to come and eat. Like, even people there in the park that were visiting would go to this lodge specifically to watch these bears eat the scraps in the evenings. So early in the morning, the bear came into their campsite and first started attacking Julie's friend Roy, where it then dragged her away, and she was found later on with serious injuries, but despite the effort of the doctors who were actually nearby in the area, she succumbed to her own injuries. The second attack was on Michelle Coons, who was also 19, and she was just 10 miles away at Trout Lake. So she was with some friends, and a bear raided their camp while they were cooking dinner, and they left their camp for a while, but then came back later on to sleep. That same bear later on came that night, and while most of the group was able to get away and climb into some trees and escape, Coons struggled to open up her sleeping bag, and she received fatal injuries, even losing her arm before she succumbed to the injuries. It seems that it is very against the odds that separate attacks would happen like this in one night, especially since this was the first fatal grizzly bear attack in the 57 years since a glacier was established as a national park. Some people like to explain it as there being some sort of supernatural reason for this strange event, like there was some sort of curse or possession in these bears, as one of the bears actually had previously chased some Girl Scouts and was described as being like not right. Some survivors even described a strange sense of dread that they felt right before the attacks even happened, like they were being watched by something. Some people even point to this Native American story that warned of not disturbing sacred ground, and how bears are often seen as like spiritual guardians to Native Americans in this area. And people like to say that maybe nature had become unbalanced because people were being associated with food. Other people like to claim that there was a bunch of lightning storms at night, and that lightning really affected the bears and made them unnaturally aggressive. Either way, bears today are treated completely different in Glacier National Park, but especially throughout all the national park systems. And instead of treating them kind of like dogs where we just give them scraps, we try to not give them any food at all or have them associate people with food, because that seems like the worst thing you could possibly do. Largest vertical cliff in the world. So Mount Thor is this mountain in Owuwetok National Park in Canada. It has the world's largest vertical drop anywhere in the entire world. This drop is a staggering 4,101 foot off of a sheer cliff. The west face of this mountain is actually so steep that it overhangs by 15 degrees. That being said, if you jumped off of the summit with a parachute, hopefully, you would be airborne for 26 seconds before you hit anything. That is a very long time. Devil's Tower mythology. So, the Devil's Tower is actually the first national monument in the United States. It's located in Wyoming, and it's considered as a sacred site for multiple Native American peoples. There's this pretty well-known mythology about this rock formation, about how there was this group of tribal children playing when suddenly a giant bear started to chase them. These kids then prayed to the Great Spirit for help, where in response, the ground beneath them rose into the sky, lifting them out of reach. The bear tried to climb up this rock and left a bunch of scratches deep into the sides of it, which is how it looks like it does today. And the children were saved, and the rock was then called Bear Lodge. But now, today, it's been renamed as the Devil's Tower. 30% Club. So, the 30% Club just means that if you enter Denali National Park and you see Mount Denali, then you are part of the 30% Club. Because only 30% of the people that visit Denali National Park actually see the mountain, because, you know, it's the tallest mountain in North America. It's so massive that it has its own weather system, so it's always cloudy, and yeah, I'm in the club. Kushtaka. So this is another Native American legend about this dangerous shape-shifting entity that is said to live in like the Pacific Northwest and Alaska area. It appears as this human or otter or human-animal hybrid often, where it's said to deceive people by mimicking the cries of babies or women to lure victims close to rivers or the ocean. This legend seems to be used as a cautionary tale to keep children from wandering near the water alone, as Alaska actually has the highest drowning rate in the United States, which is pretty shocking. Lesser known parks. So there are many parks in the United States that are really, really cool, but not many people travel to them at all. The top 10 of the least traveled national parks are Gates of the Arctic, National Park of American Samoa, Lake Clark, Kobuk Valley, Isle Royale, Katmai, North Cascades, Wrangell St. Elias, Dry Tortuga, and Great Basin. Also worth noting are a few underrated ones that I really liked, such as Theodore Roosevelt National Park, incredible park, lots of buffalo, there's wild horses. It's kind of like the Badlands in a way. There's a lot of strange formations like that. Black Canyon of the Gunnison, that's a national park in like western, I think, Colorado. People call it the Grand Canyon of Colorado, and it is a huge canyon that you would not think is there. That one's pretty cool. The Kenai Fjords, that is a national park in Alaska. Crazy place. It's just a bunch of like little fjords out there, just right on the edge of the sea. There's a lot of cliffs. There's a glacier where you can see ice just crumbling off of. There's puffins all over the place. But yeah, national parks, people need to go to them more, or maybe they should go to them less. Am I doing the opposite of gatekeeping right now? California condor. This is actually the largest bird in North America with a wingspan of 9.5 feet. This bird actually was virtually extinct extremely recently, where in 1987 there was only 22 birds left in the wild. Today the numbers are back up to like 500-ish birds, and you can see them in parks like Zion and Pinnacles National Park and Grand Canyon. When we were out traveling, we saw 2 of them actually hanging out on the top of the Grand Canyon. We saw them really not too far away, and they are really cool birds. 33 shipwrecks, Channel Islands. The Channel Islands National Park is this group of 5 islands off the coast of Southern California that are known for the incredible biodiversity and unique wildlife, such as the island fox, which is like this tiny fox thing that can like fit in the palm of your hand. This park is also known for having the oldest human remains in North America that's thought to go back to 13,000 years old. The 33 shipwrecks thing is referring to how there was these strange events where at least 33 ships sank in the Santa Barbara Channel near the Channel Islands in just over a 10-year span between 1850 and 1900. Channel Islands is also kind of an eerie park, as there's this consistent fog that sets in the morning there, and there's also this strange virus there where the deer mice have this thing called hantavirus that has no cure at all, and the fatality rate can be like 50%. However, no tourists have ever gotten the hantavirus in the national park. I was reading their website and they were like, it is not contagious to humans. But then it's like, but maybe they could get it. And I'm like, what? Is it or is it not? That's terrifying. Anyways, the legend of Denali. The legend of Denali is this really cool Native American legend about how Denali was formed. The legend goes that there is this powerful medicine man named Yahoo who went on a journey to try to find a wife, where he took the daughter of this local chief in the area, and then the chief didn't like this. So as Yahoo was escaping in a canoe, he caused this violent storm and pursued him and threw giant spears at him. But the medicine man used all his medicine and magic to turn a giant wave that was coming at him into stone to block a giant spear that was going to hit him. And now that giant wave that's now a rock is Mount Denali, also known as the Great One. Only place on Earth with crocodiles and alligators. So this is just referring to the fact that Everglades National Park is the only place on Earth to have both alligators and crocodiles living together. The reason why this is the only place that has both is because it's actually the southernmost suitable range for American alligators, and it's the northernmost suitable range for American crocodiles. This also combines with how this area has a convergence of fresh water from inland Florida and salt water from the ocean, creating the necessary habitat for both reptiles. Whenever we were on our trip, we also saw gators and 1 crocodile. We went down this biking trail and we biked for like, I feel like it was like 9 miles. And while we were biking, we saw like 39 like alligators. And then we saw the 1 crocodile. Crocodiles are like a lot scarier than gators because they have like their teeth all sticking on the outside.
Look at his teeth.
Whoa. Whoa, yeah, it is significantly lighter colored. Whoa, yeah, it's definitely got that pointy snout rather than the regular curved on those other gators. That's awesome. Wow, and he's a lot lighter colored. And we were also there during mating season, so all the gators were like roaring, and it was really crazy. Here, watch this video. Oh, he's looking at me. Oh my gosh. And every so often we'd be biking and there'd be a gator in the middle of the road and you have to go around it, and that gets a little sketchy too. Old Man of the Lake. Crater Lake is the deepest lake in the United States at 1,949 feet. So this lake formed because a volcano collapsed And because of how it's up really high and like no sediment goes into it, it's actually one of the clearest lakes in the world. You can look roughly 320 feet straight down into this lake. I swam in this lake when I was there, and it is kind of daunting when you're in this lake that you know is 1,900 feet straight down, and you can see super deep into there. But it's absolutely beautiful. We were lucky to be there when, for some reason, the water was actually pretty okay temperature. There's also this strange thing about this lake. The title of this topic is Old Man of the Lake, which is referring to this strange upright floating log inside of Crater Lake that's been drifting across the lake since 1896. Some people believe this log has like supernatural powers over the weather because one time these scientists anchored the log, they tied it up because they were going to do this submarine mission down in the lake, and as soon as they tied it up, a storm hit, and then the water only became calm after the log was untied. So magic stick. Yellowstone carnivorous plant. So this is just referring to the fact that there is a carnivorous plant inside of Yellowstone. It is called a sundew, and I've never heard of it until I did research for this video. And it has these sticky red leaves with tentacles that will like trap and suffocate insects, and it uses this like glistening substance to attract them, and that's pretty cool. Gates of the Arctic. So Gates of the Arctic National Park is this park in Alaska that is the northernmost national park in the US. It's actually situated entirely inside of the Arctic Circle. This park is so rugged, it has no trails, no campgrounds, and it doesn't even have any roads inside of the park. And there's not even a road that gets to the park, which means you have to either access the park on foot or by bush plane, and then once you're there, there's zero infrastructure, and despite being 8.4 million acres and being the second largest national park, it's actually the least visited national park because you got to do a lot to try to go there, I guess. Snow falls during 9 months of the year here, and the temperature can get as low as negative 67 degrees Fahrenheit. Also, there is a period where there's an entire month of darkness where the sun doesn't rise at all in this park. So Great Sand Dunes UFOs. So Great Sand Dunes National Park is this park in southern Colorado that's known for having the highest dunes in North America at 750 feet. This entire area is in this valley that is known for a ton of UFO sightings and unexplained aerial phenomenon. Visitors, locals, and law enforcement have all reported seeing weird things like balls of light in the sky. Some people even say these light balls will chase them, and there's even a place where someone built a UFO watchtower, and it's like a whole UFO themed tourist attraction where visitors have reported seeing 163 UFOs. Personally, I've actually been to that attraction. And anyways, Great Sand Dunes, really fun, really cool place. It gets hot sometimes. I will say there has not been a single time I have been to Great Sand Dunes that I haven't seen a rainbow. There's always a rainbow that seems to be in the east, which is kind of cool. Bison in a hot spring. In June 2025, just 2 months ago, there was this viral video of a bison or a buffalo in Yellowstone National Park that was walking alongside the Grand Prismatic Spring, which is like the big, really colorful spring there. And where it was walking is where the ground is like deceptively thin, and it basically stumbled into boiling water, and then it thrashed around, you could see in the video, but then as it fell in further, it all at once stopped moving when it was fully submerged. The sad thing is just a little while after this video was taken, you can also see a female buffalo walking along the spring looking for the male buffalo that fell in. And yeah, there is a reason why there are boardwalks, and the buffalo did not follow the rules. Egypt Grand Canyon connection. Some people think that there is somehow these Egyptian-ish artifacts or like an Egyptian-like civilization that is hidden in the Grand Canyon. The reason why they think this is because of this newspaper article from 1909. So the front page of the newspaper, Arizona Gazette, claimed that there was this explorer named G.E. Kincaid who, while traveling in the Colorado River by boat, stumbled upon a massive cave system high in the Grand Canyon. Kincaid reported that these caves had Egyptian-like hieroglyphs, Buddha-like statues, lots of mummified remains, and that he had found this essentially abandoned city in this cave that had like hundreds of rooms with things like metalworking shops and grain storage and stone tablets, which suggests that it was a highly advanced civilization that had a city inside these caves. Kincaid then allegedly contacted the Smithsonian to get help with the excavation of this ancient city. But after asking for help, all the artifacts mysteriously disappeared. People theorized that the Smithsonian covered this up, and this is one of the main reasons why people point to the Smithsonian and say they have these different things that they've hidden. But all this information about this discovery have only come from 2 articles that were posted by the Arizona Gazette newspaper in 1909. And today, most mainstream researchers have decided that these articles are a hoax created by this newspaper to sell papers. And people even go as far as to say that G.E. Kincaid wasn't even a real person. But it is very odd that the Grand Canyon has all these different formations that are named after Egyptian things, like the Isis Temple, the Temple of Ra, Osiris Temple, Horus, the Tower of Set. I'm not saying that there is some sort of connection between Egypt and the Grand Canyon, but it is really interesting that those formations are so strange looking and that they were also named after Egyptian things. I guess because they kind of resembled some of those things that existed in Egypt. Wailing woman in the Grand Canyon. So the Grand Canyon has this tale of this heartbroken woman who died by unaliving herself after her family perished on a hike. Hikers and park rangers have both reported seeing her spirit appearing in a white dress with blue flowers and hearing her cries along the Transept Trail in the Grand Canyon. And that's all I got to say about that. Grizzly Man. So Grizzly Man is this documentary about a man named Timothy Treadwell who goes and lives with grizzly bears in a very rural part of Alaska's Katmai National Park for 13 summers. This documentary focuses around the found footage from his camera, how he was living with the bears, documenting the bears, interacting with them, naming them, and talking to them like they were his friends. This documentary expresses his personal relationships with people while he was alive, his mental state, and the fine line between passion and delusion. It's actually a really incredible documentary. It won a ton of awards when it was released. And if you don't want to hear blood stuff, skip. Believe it or not, these grizzly bears were not his friend, and they ended up treating him like another prey animal. And yeah, he stayed too late in one season. And if you know grizzly bears, whenever they are like bulking to go into hibernation, they get extremely aggressive and they will eat whatever they can eat. And this one bear who had worn down canine teeth decided that he was desperate for food, and both Treadwell and his girlfriend one day were killed by that bear. What's really, really dark about this is there is a fake audio of the attack out there on YouTube. I'm not sure if it's fake or if it's real. I'm kind of leaning towards the audio being real because I just don't think someone faked it, to be honest. But in this audio, you can hear his final moments and his girlfriend telling him to play dead, which is something that I guess people say if a bear already has a hold of you, if a grizzly bear already has a hold of you, you should play dead, which I'm not even sure if that's necessarily right. But man, the audio is like haunting. But in the documentary, that's what they talk about. I actually went to Katmai National Park with my brother back in 2016 when we were working there. We worked the salmon run. We worked in a factory doing the salmon season for however many months that was. And then towards the end of that salmon season, we got to go to Katmai National Park, and we flew out there by float plane. And it was really awesome. I think we saw like 20 bears in like a span of like 6 or 8 hours. It was so many bear. And I remember at one point we were in the village area. It's not really a village. There's like one like store cabin and there's like another like park service station. But we're in this like more populated area of the park. And we see this park ranger standing up, and he stands up, he gets really big, he goes like this, but he stands up really big and he's like getting really big. I'm like, what's he doing? All of a sudden, this huge grizzly bear comes out of the woods at this park ranger, gets probably like 4 to 3 feet from him. The grizzly bear stands up, the ranger holds his ground, and the bear doesn't attack him, but instead gets back down on his 4 legs, turns, and comes towards my brother and I. The bear wasn't charging at us, but it started coming in our direction. We're like, oh, and this was a big grizzly. And we jumped up into the store that was right there in Katmai. And anyways, that's how you're supposed to treat bears whenever they charge you, because almost every time they charge you, it's a bluff. But man, grizzly bears are no joke. And the story of Grizzly Man is the pinnacle of examples of mess around and find out. That sounds mean, but I'm not saying, well, I mean kind of, but with respectfully, don't treat bears like they're dogs. The Badlands Banshee. Badlands National Park is this rugged, dry, really cool looking region in the southwest part of South Dakota. It's known for having all these layered rock formations and having minimal vegetation. There's this legend in the area about this ghostly figure known for her blood-curdling screams, kind of like a banshee. This banshee is known for kind of like foretelling death. Sites of this banshee have spanned over centuries from 1910 to as recently as 2019, and it's often believed that this creature foretells death, kind of like the legend of the banshee in Ireland. Interestingly enough, park officials and folklorists believe that the legend may have actually emerged from misinterpreted fossil discoveries, such as the skulls of prehistoric mammals that were mistaken for mythical beasts. The Valley of Headless Men. So this is an area inside of Nahanni National Park in Canada that is a park that is extremely remote, and it's known as one of the last truly unexplored regions in the world. This area is only accessible by air. It has one of the wildest rivers in North America, famed for whitewater rafting and deep canyons that are like up to 3,200 feet high. There's also a complex cave system beneath the park. The reason why it is called the Valley of Headless Men is because during a period from 1908 to 1945, at least 5 people were found murdered and decapitated along the banks of the Nahanni River. No one knows who committed these murders or what the motive was, but what I find really interesting is just a few years before these decapitation instances started, there was this very prominent Native American tribe called the Naha tribe that seemed to have just disappeared, vanished from the area. Alongside that, other Native American tribes in the area talk about how they avoid this specific valley and how they have avoided it for centuries, claiming that some sort of evil haunts it. There is also this indigenous legend about this white wolf-like creature called the Wahila that some like to say is responsible for the beheadings, as this legend of the Wahila is known for tearing people's heads off and having unnatural strength. Other people like to say that that tribe, the Naha tribe, that had disappeared, actually settled deep into the valley somewhere, or maybe even into one of the cave systems somewhere, and they aren't okay with trespassers, and so they take off their heads. But that is all pure speculation. But it is very strange. This park actually looks sick, and maybe someday I will go. Probably not, though. Devil's Tower Giant Tree Conspiracy. So this is a fringe theory about how the Devil's Tower was not formed by volcanic activity like the official scientific narrative is, but rather it claims that the Devil's Tower is a giant petrified tree stump from an ancient tree that once existed but was chopped down, or maybe just fell down on its own. This kind of ties into these ideas about how, some mountains or plateaus were also once ancient trees, and that maybe there's some sort of mythical lost civilization of giants, and that they have these massive trees, but somehow there was like a large-scale cataclysm that happened that either cut down these mega trees and just made this entire civilization disappear. And as much as I would love this to be real, I will let you interpret it. I read this really fun hypothetical that if the Devil's Tower was a giant tree stump, then this tree, based on the size of the stump, would have likely been 3 to 4 miles tall. Checkmate, Sequoia National Park. The Lady of Crescent Lake. This topic is also pretty dark, so if you guys want to skip ahead, I would do that now. So this is both a local legend and a real-life unsolved case where this lady's body was discovered in Crescent Lake in Olympic National Park in 1940. She was found hogtied, wrapped in blankets, and found floating in the water after years of being there. She was also perfectly preserved by this chemical process that turned her fat into a soap-like substance, and due to how cold the water was and how there was a lot of rich minerals in the water. The body was found to belong to Haley Illingworth, who had been strangled and dumped 3 years earlier by her own husband, who was a known drunk. After the Lady of the Lake was found, he was found guilty of second-degree murder, and this story has led to the legend of the Lady of the Lake. That's about this spirit trapped in the lake that is unable to move on due to her violent death. Tisaruk Kenai Fjords. So the Tisaruk is this Inuit legend about this massive sea serpent that dwells in the icy waters along Alaska. This thing is often associated with the Kenai Fjords National Park and the larger Bering Sea region. It's said to have a head that's about 6 foot long and then have a 12-foot long body with transparent skin and a flipper-like tail. The legend goes that the Tisaruk will go around and snatch people who are alone near the water from piers or from boats, and then drag victims into the waves, leaving no trace. Based off of the Tisaruk's description, no surprise that this thing looks like a large marine mammal, like a seal, that is nearly identical to how it looks, and that's where this legend was likely inspired from. Bermuda Triangle of Yosemite. So this is a valley in Yosemite National Park called Tenaya Valley. It got this name because of all these reports of strange events and unexplained deaths and disappearances. Tenaya Valley actually got that name because of the story of Chief Tenaya. This was a Native American chief who cursed this valley after his son was killed. The story of his son getting killed is about how there was these European settlers that were trying to move his tribe out onto a reservation in the 1850s where his son was killed trying to fight them off. The curse is said to linger, and the valley has at least 17 confirmed deaths since the 1850s. Another thing to note is that this canyon valley is unmapped, unmaintained, and it requires expert level climbing and navigation skills to do well in this area. People who venture through this valley say they experience weird sounds and unexplained events, such as having their sleeping bag tugged at night or just feeling like they're being watched. And this canyon is often described as holding the original spirit of Yosemite, which I wonder why it was called that. Did Yosemite originally feel eerie? Only interstellar object ever seen. So Haleakala is this huge dormant volcano in Haleakala National Park. It is famous for having one of the clearest skies for stargazing in the world. The only interstellar object is referring to how Haleakala has this observation on top of it that spotted the first interstellar object that we have ever found in our solar system back in 2017. So this basically means that nothing from outside of our solar system has ever entered our solar system that we have ever recorded, except for this object, this 1/4 mile long asteroid that they saw on the top of Haleakala Mountain. They ended up naming this object Oumuamua, and what's really strange is this object seemed to speed up as it was leaving our solar system, which is far more than other comets do whenever they fly by sun's gravity. So it seems that it was somehow self-propelled, according to what some scientists say. So this leads to a lot of wild speculations, like that this asteroid was somehow an extraterrestrial craft and that sort of thing. And it is really crazy that nothing's came into our solar system until this thing comes around, and then it acts strange, you know? Isn't that weird? I think that's strange. Next up, we got the Yucca Man. The Yucca Man is this legend about this Bigfoot-ish-like creature that is said to dwell in the Mojave Desert near Joshua Tree National Park. So the Yucca Man is said to look like this thing with stringy, unkept hair that looks eerily similar to a yucca tree, which is where it got its name. The Yucca Man, obviously. The main legend originated near the 29 Palms base in the Mojave Desert, which is this Marine Corps base that is very large, larger than some small countries. And there's been a few reports of the Yucca Man since the 1970s, where different military personnel say they encounter this thing that's like this up to 12-foot tall creature that specifically emerges in the dead of the night, and you can hear this blood-curdling scream that comes with this creature, and that it's very violent. And the legend that started this entire thing was back in 1971. There was this young recruit who was on duty at night who heard a horrible scream and encountered this tall, hairy beast thing with red eyes and smelled awful. And the next day, he was found unconscious and barely alive with his rifle bent in half. Some people like to say that these stories started because soldiers were wearing ghillie suits and running around scaring people, which is incredible. But I really like this legend because I feel like anyone can go to like Joshua Tree National Park and be creeped out because basically all the trees look like this violent, hairy ape tree man. Valley of 10,000 Smokes. So the Valley of 10,000 Smokes is a name given to a valley inside of Katmai National Park in Alaska. So back in 1912, there was an eruption of this volcano called Nova Rupta. This was the largest volcanic eruption in the entire 1900s anywhere in the world. After this eruption, there was a whole bunch of these fumaroles, which were like these huge vents that were putting up smoke and steam that was coming out of the ground. It was like volcanic gas and stuff. And so people were going into the valley, and this one guy was like, hey, this is the Valley of 10,000 Smokes. And they were like, that's the name. We'll never change it. And today, most of the fumaroles have stopped steaming, but I guess there's still a few out there. I don't have confirmation on that. Anyways, really cool. I wanted to go there when I was there, but I wasn't able to. Everything is just covered in ash still, from an eruption that happened like 100 years ago, which is so crazy. It kind of looks like a barren wasteland, but it's cool. Big volcano. The Queen of Death Valley. So this is kind of like a legend about how Death Valley got its name. The story goes that Death Valley was once a lush, fertile paradise, but this mysterious, greedy woman settled there with her tribe and then started ordering her people to build her a mansion that would surpass their neighbors, which were the Aztecs. So for many years, her people toiled building this huge structure, but it was taking a long time, and fearing that she would die before it was finished, she, in desperation, enslaved her tribe, even forcing her daughter to join the labor. But one day, the queen was angry and struck her daughter in a fit of rage. The girl cursed her mother and the land itself, where she then sank into the earth and vanished. The queen regretted what she had done, but it didn't matter. All nature seemed to punish her. The sun came out and withered up all the vegetation, all the water dried up, and the queen died alone in her half-completed mansion after all of her people in her tribe had died. Anyways, after doing more research on this thing, it turns out this legend might be completely fake, and that maybe this isn't even Native American mythology at all. But I thought it was really cool, so I included it. You're welcome for the misinformation. Lost national parks. This is talking about national parks that either no longer exist or were turned into something else or redesignated as like national monuments. Since 1895, there have been at least 26 sites that have officially been removed or changed to something else. Examples of them are Mackinac Island National Park, which was, that island in Lake Michigan. It was actually the second national park ever created, and it existed until the late 1800s, where it was turned into, is it a state park? Is Mackinac Island a state park? Yes, it is a state park. There was also Hawaii National Park, which was just one big park that included both Hawaii Volcanoes, and Haleakala National Park combined into one. There was also Papago Saguaro National Monument, which is a crazy story. I'll try to summarize it real quick. Basically, Papago Saguaro was this Indian reservation, and then in 1914, Woodrow Wilson designated this area as a national monument, but he lacked the funding to preserve it, and people just started vandalizing all the rock formations and like putting up advertisements everywhere. And then in 1930, the park was abolished because it was damaged so bad and the rocks were all screwed up. And then shortly after this, the governor of Arizona built a pyramid inside of the park as a tomb for his wife, where he then just like a few years later was also buried, which I thought was really freaking weird. And then this park was used as a prisoner of war camp holding German soldiers during World War II. And then a bunch of those prisoners actually escaped, and what is now called the Great Papago Escape of 1944, which was the largest escape of POWs in the US during World War II. That's all really crazy, and now today Papago is split up between the Phoenix Zoo, the National Guard, and other places. Some other ones that are kind of less interesting are ones like Abraham Lincoln National Park, Shoshone Cavern National Monument, Rock Creek National Park, Sully's Hill National Park, Platte National Park, General Grant National Park, and Fort McHenry National Park. Most of these areas were either repurposed as like wildlife refuges or turned into state parks because it just made more sense. But I find it really interesting. Like some of the parks were just like, I think one of the cave ones, it was like Buffalo Bill went with a guy to find a cave, and it was like, it wasn't even like a cool looking cave at all. And they were like, hey, Roosevelt, you should make this a national park. And he was like, done. Didn't even look at it. You just made a national park. And then like later on they were like, why is this a national park? And they got rid of it. Giant mummy. So this is referring to this legend about these giant mummies that were found inside of Death Valley National Park. In 1947, there was this man named Howard E. Hill from Los Angeles who told this story about he allegedly heard another story from another guy named Dr. F. Bruce Russell. And according to the tale, Dr. Russell told this guy that in 1931 he was prospecting, looking for like gold mining opportunities, when he came across this network of underground caves in Death Valley National Park. Anyways, while digging in this cave, this guy claims that the soil gave way and revealed this massive, huge cave system, and after exploring it further, he found a series of tunnels that covered an estimated 180 square miles. I don't know how he would have just gone in there, oh, these are 180 miles, and then gone back out, but this is his story. Anyways, when he was down in these caves, he said he discovered things like the remains of these 3 men that were each 8 to 9 feet tall, that were dressed in garments that resembled sheepskin, artifacts and markings that resembled a mix between Egyptian and American Indian designs, and even one chamber that he described as a ritual hall. This is where he said he found the preserved remains of animals such as a saber-toothed tiger and woolly mammoths, but also dinosaurs. The story goes on about how Russell later attempted to relocate the caves to show others, but he could not find them because of the shifting desert sands. Dr. Russell also later on disappeared, and his car was found abandoned in Death Valley, according to the story. What's interesting is it seems that this story takes inspiration from another historical Paiute legend about this mythology of this chief that had to travel through this huge underground passage into the real land of the dead, encountering like supernatural beings and mummy-like things, and it kind of mirrors this story in a way. Anyways, obviously this story came from an unreliable source telling a story that he heard from another unreliable source, and now you're hearing it from another unreliable source. Zion National Park Secret Cave. So this is kind of a joke. I mean, it's not, because some people think that Zion National Park has a secret cave in this big rock wall. So in order to get to Zion National Park from the east entrance, there is this massive tunnel that goes underneath Mount Carmel, called the Mount Carmel Tunnel. If you look back at the mountains where the tunnel goes through, you will see this massive window in the tunnel that goes to the outside that they used to access it when they were first blasting out the rock to create the tunnel. Someone posted online, spotted this secret cave, or supposed man-made cave. It appears hidden and man-made. Anyone know what this is? As if this thing is like a secret entrance to something. I mean, I don't know what to say. Supposedly man-made. It is very clearly a perfectly made structure with 90-degree angles, and it's just funny that they would word it like this. I don't know if this was a troll or if this was just a joke in general. It is kind of a cool looking cave, I will say. It's pretty cool looking because it's just a huge rock face and then cave, supposedly man-made cave. Everglades satanic cult. So the Everglades is a massive amount of land, and some people will go in and hunt these invasive pythons that are there because they're destroying the environment. And so this guy named Mike Kimmel, also known as the Python Cowboy, he's this licensed wildlife trapper who traps these invasive pythons, and he spends a lot of time in the Everglades. But he tells this story, and he actually shows video evidence of what he found there, where one night he was out hunting snakes and he went into this abandoned rocket facility in the middle of the Everglades to hunt snakes, where this facility, once owned by Aerojet, housed rocket silos that was funded by NASA. First, when he got here, he came across this large pile of rocks that had a bunch of upside down crosses painted in red spray paint. In this pile, he found a doll that had painted in ash an upside down cross on its forehead. And what's really weird is he found this coral snake that was wrapped around the doll's neck, and it was a living snake that was moving around as if no one had placed it there and it had just gotten on the doll on its own, which is really weird. Anyways, in the Python Cowboy story, he goes further into the facility where he sees in large red spray paint words written in Latin that translates to something along the lines of "turn around, he's watching, run." Once he got into the facility's buildings, he found this large 50-foot pentagram with a 3-legged chair sitting in the middle, and underneath the chair it looks like there is a puddle of dried blood. He also claimed at this point he felt like the energy was really dark and negative in this area, and that when he walked past this doll, he almost felt like it grabbed his leg, and yeah, I would imagine the energy would feel pretty dark there. Even further into the facility, there was more spray paint and there was graffiti that claimed that they were sacrificing people there, and they were sacrificing children, and there was a sleeping bag that looked like it had blood on it. As it turned out, this facility in the Everglades was owned by Aerojet, which was a NASA-funded rocket manufacturer that did stuff during the Cold War. What's crazy is the operator and founder of Aerojet was actually a public Satanist. His name was Nick Parsons. He was this brilliant scientist, but a real creepy and evil dude. He practiced this thing called thelema, which did these things called high magic, which was like a structured ritual use of symbols and strange, like cultish things where they thought they were like doing rituals to benefit them. This guy also mysteriously died, and people think it was during a satanic ritual, as he blew up at his house. There was an explosion in his house and he died, and some people think that, I don't know, ritual gone wrong. He blew up the hell portal or something. Anyways, this guy also thought that his wife was a demon that he had somehow conjured up out of hell. Anyways, he was big into rituals. He was actually a follower of this guy named Aleister Crowley, who was this very famous occultist who founded the religion of thelema, which is basically just Satanism. Not only was he a follower of this guy, but he was actually good friends with him. And it seems like he was even mentored by Crowley, who was deemed, you know, the wickedest man in the world. I could see Jack Parsons doing likely something very similar to what the Python Cowboy found that night. Maybe followers of Crowley and Thelema somehow view this abandoned rocket place as a historical place, and that maybe they perform rituals there because they think that this place is special, or that there's, you know, dark, bad juju there, or maybe they were just wanting to prank and scare people. But anyways, you know, what stays in the Everglades hopefully stays in the Everglades. But we have made it to the end of the National Park Iceberg. I've got to say, if you've stuck around to the end, thank you so much. You guys make my dreams come true when you watch these ungodly long videos about just absolutely deranged topics. You are just like me for real. Cy Copley from the future again. Quick merch plug. If you want to get your hands on that limited time National Park shirt that we made specifically for this video, this is it right here. It is really sick. It's the same material as these other merch shirts, like the Hollow Earth one, and then like the, you know, Kraken is real, Cryptid Hunting Team, I got a lobotomy. So if you want to support the channel, we're not monetized super well, but if you buy the merch, it helps out a lot. But anyways, thank you guys for 530 subs on YouTube. I do not deserve it. I don't know why I have these subscribers. I thank you for giving them to me. But I have a lot of projects in the works right now, lots of icebergs. And yeah, I had a really, really good time making this chart and doing the research for this. I love national parks. I love legends. I thought, why not we combined them into one big video, and we did. And here we are, and this is the end of it. And I have completely talked my voice out, and I probably won't be able to talk tomorrow, but it's the price you pay to play the game. But get out there, you know, get outside. Have a good time. You're on your computer too much. You're online too much. Quit being online. Go outside. Get into nature. Have a good time. Climb some mountains. Go on some hikes. Love your family. There's a lot of amazing places, beautiful places. There's probably one really close to you that you don't even realize is there. And maybe you should go and look up national park or state park. And you should go out there and you should do a hike because it's good for you and for everything, for your mind, for your body. And you know what? This might be it for my career. This might be where I have peaked. So if that's true, thank you for watching. Thank you for being here for my short-lived career on YouTube. And I will see you maybe in the next one. Goodbye. Here we go, Lindsay. This is the end. Woo! Yes.
Let's go! Oh my goodness.
What do we do now?
There's the sign.
Bright Angel Trailhead. Wow.